What's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you or someone you know? Serious. I worked with a girl who casually told the story of someone almost kidnapping her little sister. One day she walked outside to tell her 6-year-old sister to come inside, and her sister was climbing into the open door of a car at the end of the driveway. My coworker screamed, and the car drove off without the sister. TL. Dr. Asam Club's employee took pictures of me in the bathroom when I was 12. When I was 12, my family and I went to Sam's Club. Being a little asshole, I decided that I didn't want to walk with my family, so I wandered around looking at clothes and books. An employee kept watching me, like staring really bad. I figured he thought I was going to steal, so I smiled at him, so he knew I wasn't bad. He smiled back. He kept checking me out though, and asked me how old I was. We talked about my favorite books and video games. I remember being uncomfortable, but couldn't figure out why, because he was super nice to me. I remember wondering if he was flirting with me, but reasoned that he couldn't be, because I'm a boy. Really weird conclusion to come to, but I was 12. I genuinely thought he was just interested in my favorite video games. The conversation died down, and I decided I needed to piss, so I went into the bathroom. Less than 10 seconds later, and the restroom door opens. The guy stands in front of my stall, even though there were empty ones. I recognized the guy's shoes as the employees. I stand there for a couple minutes, done pissing, but really confused and kind of scared. I thought he followed me because he thought I was stealing. Then the guy held a camera over the stall door and took a picture of me, like real quick. 1 or 2 pictures of me just fucking standing there looking up at the camera. My dick wasn't out or anything. Just me, in the bathroom. Someone else came in, and he immediately went to the sink and started washing his hands, like he'd just finished using the bathroom. Then he left. It was really creepy. I didn't tell my mom anything, except that the Sam's Club guy thinks I'm stealing. And she laughed. I realized while later that he was a pedophile. I'm a biologist that often has to do fieldwork surveying unmaintained private properties in the middle of nowhere. Long story short, we find a body face up in a stream deep in a thickly wooded wetland. The body looked several months old, at least. No clothes, no tools, no shelter, nothing nearby to suggest who he is, or how he got there. We couldn't even tell race or gender from what we saw. We call the police and they immediately tell us it's probably the missing person who ditched his car nearby. They apparently searched for weeks with dogs, horses, and ATVs but didn't find any sign of the guy. All they found was his family car loaded with cash and a handgun. They also tell us he seemed to be running from someone or something, real or imagined, they weren't sure. Apparently the man didn't even close his car door, just ditched it at a rail crossing, and took off running into the woods in a tremendous hurry. I find his clothes about 30 yards up the stream bank from where the body was found. His pants were neatly folded and placed on top of his nice brown loafers, underpants and socks on top of those. He placed his glasses atop his socks, very orderly and in a nice pile. His shirt and undershirt were hanging from a tree branch right above those as if to dry. I mean, the whole thing creeps me out even a year on. But what unsettles me is the fact that he ran from his family, drove several hours from his home, ditched his car, and fought a mile through briars and thick woods only to stop and carefully fold and hang his clothes before meeting his end. I look him up every now and then and still can't find any more info about what happened or why. I was at my uncle's house in some countryside with my sister and we were playing hide and seek. My uncle went out to buy some food for us. I was hiding downstairs in this weird closet/attic thing I found. I heard a little banging noise and got a little spooked. I then chalked it up to a little rat or something and continued to hide. I then heard a snore and a groan. I immediately got out and ran to my sister. We both sat at the door together, crying, until my uncle got home. My uncle just laughed it off, and we were relieved. A decade later, an old man's dead body was found when my uncle tried to sell the house. It was revealed he was squatting there for almost a decade, and he had written in a notebook how he was going to kill my uncle and keep the home for himself, and I think that would have happened if he didn't die. When my cousin was a teenager, maybe 18 or 19, she and her friends went out to party a lot. In my country you can legally start drinking with 16 over 18. so most teenagers start going to clubs at 16. Back then, hitchhiking was still pretty common and most teenagers did it to get home or to the city, since only very few had cars of their own. So my cousin and her friend want to go home after a night out and get picked up by a middle-aged guy. He's nice enough, and they make small talk while they drive. Suddenly, he takes a turn onto a remote road leading into the woods. He locks the car from the inside and his friendly facade falls. Instead, he's suddenly tense, quiet and determined. My cousin's friend started crying quietly, but my cousin stays calm and starts talking to the man. She tells him about her family, her mom and dad, her brother and sister, and asks if he also has a family. When he tells her that he has a wife and 2 children, she asks for their names and how old they are, which school they go to, what their hobbies are, all while he drives them deeper into the woods. It must have triggered something, because after talking with him for a couple of minutes, he stops his car and breaks down. He starts crying and tells them that things are going well at home, that his marriage is pretty bad, and he fears he'll lose his kids. My cousin comforts him during his breakdown and lets him spill his heart out. Eventually, he starts the car again, turns around and drives them home, saying he's sorry. They get out once they reach the street my cousin lived on, and when he drives off, my cousin sees him put a knife on the passenger seat that he had kept hidden next to him. They never hitchhiked again. TL. Doctor, my cousin and her friend almost got raped, or worse, while hitchhiking. When I was a child in New Hampshire, I went exploring by myself and got lost in the woods. I was not worried about it in the least and was just walking around. All of a sudden, I noticed someone standing about 25 feet away from me, and he was just standing perfectly still facing me. He was all bundled up in a bunch of shirts and jackets, one over the other, and his face was completely hidden by what looked like dirty rags. He was wearing big flat lensed goggles. He just stood there staring at me. I stared back for a few seconds, and then turned and ran. Maybe 30 minutes later, I managed to find my way back to the edge of the lake, and was able to get back to where we were staying. I was 11 and my brother was 4. It was late at night and we were alone. My mother and stepfather were out, along with my little sister. Since we were not his children, we rarely got to go out with them. I was watching TV and my brother had fallen asleep next to me on the couch. From the couch you could see a large window with sheer curtains. Outside of that window was a parking area. I realized there was a man at the window. He just stood there looking in. This was before cell phones, so I couldn't call my mom. I tried calling my aunt, but she lived in another town and I think she thought I was imagining things. I tried calling the police, and they said they'd send someone, but they didn't seem to be taking me seriously either. The man started to try to get the window open. I was paralyzed with fear. At some point I realized I was shaking and this snapped me out of my panic. I tried to shake my brother awake, telling him there was someone trying to break in, but he was so deeply asleep that I could not rouse him. By this time I was near tears and shaking so badly I couldn't leave my brother there, and the man was still trying to get in. As I'm trying to lift/drag him, I hear the front door coming open. It was my family returning. It turns out that they had walked right by the man. He was leaning against a car. He greeted them and asked if they had a lighter for his cigarette. My mom later remarked on how friendly he seemed. I definitely feel like someone was watching out for me and my brother that day. Minutes later and the man would have likely been in the house. I sleep in the basement. There's a rec room in the basement with a fireplace in it. Often during the winters my father would tend the fireplace and I could hear it from my room. So one day when I was sitting in my room reading a book or something, I heard the scraping noise of my dad tending the fire. I heard the crackling of the fire and my dad closing the door of the fireplace. I exited my room, planning on asking him for a can of Coke or something, but no one was there. The fireplace door was left open and one of the tools used to tend the fire was laying on the floor. Suddenly everything felt colder. I ran upstairs and didn't go back down until I went to bed. The same thing happened again and again. Even though I was the only one in the basement, I don't know what happened there, but do I really want to know? My old bedroom is right next to the front door of the house, same floor too, so I often see people coming up to the door and can go greet them easily or see any deliveries. A few years ago we got ding dong ditched. Do they still call it that? A few kids ran up to our door at 9 p.m, slammed on the door, and then ran into the woods across the street. I own some powerful flashlights, spotted them easily, and told them to get the hell out of my sight. They did it an hour later, and I heard them coming up to the door and laugh as they ran away. We called non-emergency number, and it turns out an officer was already coming out here because we weren't the first to call. Here's where the creepy part comes in. Now it's 2 nights later, no issues the night before. It's about 2 a.m. now. I'm still awake lying in bed, and I hear heavy footsteps approach the door followed by slamming on it and someone running away. I was nowhere near falling asleep and could tell it was a hell of a lot louder than the kids who pranked us a few nights before. I also took note that there was a single set of footsteps and no laughing children this time. We called non-emergency again, and they sent a patrol car quickly. One officer came to our door to talk, while the other went around the house to see if someone was hiding in our yard. Turns out it could have been someone trying to break in, because our area was having issues with burglaries. They prank you to see if you're home. If you answer the door, then someone is home, and they pick another house. If no one answers, then it's safe to break in. They said it was a possibility, because it had happened twice in the neighborhood in the past few months. Those kids must have been caught and given a serious lesson about what was happening. Otherwise, the police would have probably assumed it was them again. What was really creepy was thinking about how that person was just on the other side of the wall outside from where I was in my room. I had trouble falling asleep for a while after that. I met this girl who had done pretty serious mental issues. Dunno what all they were, but she was on income assistance and required to medicate. She decided we were destined to be together because we were born in the same year. She changed her phone number 4 times to trick me into answering because I screened her calls. She showed up at my work a couple times. She once decided to run away, hopped on a bus, and rode 800 kilometers away before changing her mind. Texted me at 3 a.m. asking me to come pick her up because she didn't have return fare, or failing that, sent her some money. But this all pales in comparison to one of my friends. See, I was her second choice. She had a much bigger crush on this other guy. He was sharing a house with some other friends, and it was kind of a communal hangout for a lot of people, so they didn't lock the door. She went over at like 2 p.m. on a weekday afternoon when everyone was at work, and fell asleep in his bed. She also hid in some bushes near his car with a knife, and when he came by, she threatened to kill herself if he didn't give her a hug. He filed a police report after that one, and may have got her. When I was a kid and working at a Subway, I had a coworker who I wasn't remotely close with, but he was a nice, chill dude. I recall him remarking once jokingly that he didn't think he'd make it to 25. He was 24 yo. The only other memory I have was working with him one afternoon and having this overwhelming, hard to explain feeling. A compulsion to talk to him, ask him about himself and his life, just this internal voice saying, get to know him, let him feel heard. It was weird, but I went with it. I got a call the next morning from our boss that he had died a few hours after our shift together. Something hereditary to do with his liver. It really spooked me, but since then I've had the same feeling twice, once with my dog, and then my grandma, both of whom died unexpectedly and soon after the feeling emerged. The initial experience made the next 2 so much smoother, for lack of a better word, to deal with. I didn't ignore the intuition, and I felt like I had time to emotionally prepare and make sure there was nothing left unsaid or unasked, or, in the case of my dog, uncuddled. I don't even think it's anything supernatural. Our bodies and our senses are delicate and powerful, and I feel like some people are hypersensitive to little changes and fluctuations that hint at death or life, that is pregnancy. In the moment, you can't put your finger on what's off, or else, in your case, you're right on point, but can't rationalize how you reached it. But I believe it's more common than we realize, though a lot of people have been conditioned to shut down / ignore these feelings because they can't explain / rationalize them. I got off work early one day and go back to my apartment to relax before I have to go pick up my boyfriend. We only have one car. When I get to my apartment building there are 4 guys, 1 I recognize as living there, and 3 must be visitors, standing at the parking lot entrance to the building being loud and joking around. I warily walk around the group of guys and unfortunately have to get close to them to get in the door. There is another door clear on the other side of the building. That oftentimes doesn't work. They start whistling and calling out to me. I ignore them, punch in the passcode, and keep walking, not even looking in their direction, because I don't want to encourage them. One of them catches the door before it closes and follows me inside, uncomfortably close up 3 flights of stairs. No elevators in the building, which I'm kind of glad about now. I have my keys out and placed between my knuckles. I start walking up the steps faster and pull open the heavy door to my hallway with only enough space for me to get through, and luckily the door closes fast. I use this to my advantage and sprint down my hallway to my door and get my key in the lock. The guy pushes the hallway door open and sprints after me. I turn my lock and slam my door behind me, locking it again. Just as he reaches the door, there are only 6 apartments on each floor, 3x2, and my door is in the middle. I watch as my handle shakes and jiggles as he tries to open my door. He calls out to me, "I know you're in there." I don't answer as I call my boyfriend, asking him to grab a cab and explain what just happened. Then I call the police, where they tell me they can't do anything as he didn't get into my apartment, and tell me that by the time they get to me the guy will probably be gone anyways. When my boyfriend got him, they were gone. I didn't go home early until after that guy moved out and acquired family with a baby took his place. I never saw the guy who tried to get into my apartment again, and I hope it stays that way. I was walking to the corner store around 11ish at night, and down the street, maybe a couple hundred yards, I see a silhouette of this guy in a trench coat, and he's just crossing the street, so I don't think anything of it, and he passed a dumpster behind a business and stops and looks directly at me. He doesn't turn around at all. He walks backwards, still staring me down, and pulls something out of his trench coat, and a laser shines on me as he pulls it out. I freeze up as he hides behind the dumpster. I turned the fuck around given the size of the object and the all-around nightmarish figure stalking me. This was near where I lived, and I was watching at the corner because I know the neighbors, and he stepped out as I was about to cut the corner and stared me down. It was a foggy night, and it was unusually quiet. Fuck that shit. In 2010 I was outside late at night with 2 friends, 3 guys all around 20 yo. We were sitting on a small playground late at night between a couple of big residential buildings. Must have been around 4 AM and really dark when we heard a noise behind us. We were laughing at first, then heard another sound which made us silent in seconds. We were looking at us, all freezed but still not sure what's behind us. After a couple of seconds pure silence, a friend of mine made some kind of whale noise, which was answered by one of the craziest sounds/screams I'd ever heard. You even heard something running at us, which made us all start running in seconds. I don't know, something in our minds told us to GTFO without even saying it. First we were talking about it for weeks, but when time passed by we more or less forgot about it. Half a year later we found out that a murder escaped from a local psychiatry and that there was arrest late at night just a few meters away from that playground. He was living in the forest behind the places, hid there and was looking for new victims. 10 years passed by and I still shit my pants just thinking about it. Once I woke up in the middle of the night. It was dark in my room with only a bit of blow light from the humidifier. All of a sudden I felt a presence in my room and was completely paralyzed. Again suddenly I felt like I was being dragged. Even though I couldn't see anything or anyone, I still felt violated. And when I was being dragged, my bed all of a sudden felt like it went on forever. I knew what was going on, so I tried my very best to stay calm, because the more you freak out the worse it will get. I started wiggling my toes, even though it hurt, since they fell asleep. I shut my eyes tightly, reminding myself it wasn't real. And then I opened them, and the dragging stopped. I'll never forget that Tuesday night.